One of the biggest things that's changed for me over the last couple of weeks since the election is that I've finally started to break my toxic relationship with the cable news networks. It was one of those things that I knew I needed to do for a long time, like quitting smoking. But I think I had become pretty trauma bonded with MSNBC in particular during the first Trump administration. During those first 4 years, I did this thing compulsively every morning. The first thing I did when I would wake up is grab the TV remote and check, usually Morning Joe, to see if the world was still more or less how I left it when I went to sleep. It's not that I thought that MSNBC was infallible, although I tended to agree with them more than most of the other networks. It was just that I felt like I was well calibrated to their particular brand of smoke and mirrors, that I could tell when they were paying selective attention to some topics and not to others. I just felt like I learned how to watch them a little better. The thing is, it's easy to be sort of vaguely skeptical about the networks in general and harder to reject them on an individual personality basis. I can say that I know that MSNBC is capable of some of the same tricks as the other networks. It's harder to watch an episode of Rachel Maddow or Joy Reid or even Nicole Wallace and not say, well, this is a person who is operating in earnest, who generally seems to care. Although that does not absolve the networks in general from the kind of groupthink that led us up to the election and the way that it played out. I guess something snapped for me this week with this Morning Joe drama. Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough of Morning Joe on MSNBC went down to Mar-a-Lago and cozied up to Donald Trump after years of sounding the alarm bell and expressing growing anger and even outrage at times, comfortingly so, about the threat that Donald Trump has posed over the last 10 years or so. I guess what really flipped that switch for me was watching how quickly and easily they redirected the anger that had been pointed at Donald Trump for several years around onto their audience, who expressed dismay and confusion at their decision to cozy up to Donald Trump. The defensiveness and self righteous indignation they expressed was really upsetting. Joe and Mika tried to make it sound as though their decision to reestablish communication with Donald Trump was somehow an act of bravery, that they were doing it for us, to maintain a dialogue with a man to try and temper his worst instincts, as though that has ever been possible, as though he will change one decision that he is going to make about his administration. The only people that could potentially be helped by this are Joe and Mika, who clearly seem to be trying to cover themselves in an environment where Trump is going to be targeting his enemies for retribution. So it broke the spell, and honestly, my mental health has improved as I have all but cut off contact other than the occasional headline check. It makes it harder work to find accurate news, but it's good work. I'm curious what other people do. What are your trusted sources for news as you've removed yourself from the cable news ecosystem? Places that use good sourcing and that are reliable. Share your favorites here.
We have some huge breaking news. Ratings for Morning Joe after Joe and Mika visited Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago and reconciled with him have plummeted. According to new numbers released, at 6 a.m., Mika and Joe announced that they had met Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago and that they reopened lines of communication. 38% of those in the 25 to 34 demographic had stopped watching by the next hour. People literally fled Morning Joe's show because they decided to reconcile with a man who they called a threat to a democracy for years. And all of a sudden, they decided to open up a line of communication with Trump and kiss the ring at Mar-a-Lago because they were fearful of possible retribution. Folks, this is the problem with mainstream media. Mainstream media is willing to tell you that Donald Trump is a threat and then cozy up to him. Well, folks, I'm not going to Mar-a-Lago. I'm not kissing the ring. I'm not cozying up to Donald Trump. I'm just giving you the news and the facts straight up. So I really appreciate all of your guys' support, and I think it's pretty interesting that their ratings are plummeting. As always, follow along to stay up to date on all the news you need to know about.
Well, look at that. So it turns out that an hour after Morning Joe announced that they went down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, that pretty much within the hour, their viewership between ages, I think it's 16 to 58-year-olds, plummeted to 40%. They lost almost half their viewership by announcing that they opened lines of communication again with Trump. And honestly, it's a good thing because, we have all been, we've all seen Fox News and all these more right-wing media become beholden to their viewers. And I was honestly worried if on the left side we would experience the same thing and if all the media would just, succumb to Trump also. But seeing how much power we had and that everybody, myself included, stopped watching Morning Joe immediately after that. I mean, I already started watching them less because they seemed a little off, but to see that they almost lost a 50% viewership is such a big signal to the rest of MSNBC, to CNN, to like any other media outlet, that like people also give a shit to know that their media is keeping integrity and not just going down to kiss the ring and saying whatever Trump wants. I think it's like such a important signal that the public sent to media right now. I think that's amazing. So that's a positive.